My wife and I made love. I had already brought her to the finish line twice, and now the two of us were approaching the finish line. And here's the release. For a moment we just lay there, overcome with bliss, when her eyes opened. I kissed her softly on the lips and rolled over, placing her head on my shoulder. As we slowly came to our senses, I thought about the chain of events that had led us to this moment. My wife Kelly and I were with our friends Chuck and Beverly Conrad for our monthly Last Friday of the Month event. We had a nice dinner at Legal Seafoods and moved the party to Phoenix Landing for an evening of drinking and dancing. We finished our first round of drinks and did a few dances, exchanging partners a couple of times, before returning to our table to order another round of drinks. A wave of excitement ran through the club. We were puzzled at first, but then we noticed that James Wilson, the new Patriots quarterback, had just walked in. He and his entourage took a table at the other end of the club, and just as things began to calm down, new excitement began. Brianna Brown, a local host, had just walked in, but she was more than just a host. She was a former Miss Massachusetts and Miss America finalist, obviously gorgeous, and there were rumors that she was being considered for an even bigger market. Her band sat on our side of the club, but closer to the DJ booth. Beverly stared at Wilson with her goo-goo eyes. "Damn, he can put those boots under my bed anytime he wants," she said breathlessly. "Mine too," Kelly said. Chuck looked angry, and I tried to defuse the situation. "Do I need to remind you, lady, that you are married?" I said. "Come on, Matt, relax," Beverly said. "Besides, it's unlikely to ever happen," Kelly added. "Even if so, it will only be one night, the chance of a lifetime. What's bad about it? Now it's my turn to steam." "The bad thing is that it would be the end of the marriage," Chuck said. "How would you feel if Brianna was with one of us?" "Yeah, as if that would ever happen," Kelly grinned. "Why is this less likely than you and Wilson?" "Chuck and I aren't exactly dogs." Both she and Beverly laughed. "Seriously, Matt, Beverly and I have been asked to dance at least half a dozen times already. How many women have asked you to dance? I'll tell you, 0. That's only because women don't usually ask men to dance, especially if the men are with their wives." "It doesn't matter," they said at the same time, rolling their eyes. Now, Kelly and Beverly are pretty hot, and not just housewives hot, but Chuck and I aren't exactly chopped liver. We train regularly, we move well, and we can dance without stepping on anyone's feet. The conversation was almost back to normal when Beverly began practically jumping up and down in her seat, clapping her hands as if she was trying to bring Tinkerbell back to life. "He's coming here!" she exclaimed. "Who?" I began to ask, then looked over my shoulder, and sure enough, Wilson was heading in our direction, stopping at each table to sign autographs or pose for selfies. Finally, he got to our table. "Excuse me," he said. "Would you mind if I asked your charming wife to dance?" Although I was pleased that he was kind enough to ask me first, I was tempted to say no until I saw Kelly's head bouncing up and down like a yo-yo. I nodded, and when he turned around, he didn't even have to ask because Kelly was already standing up taking his hand, and they headed out to the dance floor. I have to admit that they were a lovely couple, but when the music changed to a slow song and she melted into his arms, I felt anger rise within me. Just as I was about to get up, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder and a melodic voice said, "Can I invite you?" I turned around and probably looked like a complete moron, looking into the bluest eyes I had ever seen, and they belonged to Brianna Brown. I felt like I was in a trance as I stood up and followed her onto the dance floor. The slow song was still playing as she wrapped her arms around my neck and pressed her perfect breasts against my chest. I carefully placed my hands on her waist, but she moved them to her back, dangerously close to her perfect ass. "Sorry, I don't want to seem ungrateful, but why me? There must be a dozen guys here closer to your league than me." Her laughter was delightful, and her eyes sparkled with a special sparkle. "I saw what happened to your wife and Wilson," she said, and must have noticed my frown. "I understand your feelings. I've seen this before, and I'm afraid it rarely ends well." "What do you mean? I don't understand." "Almost every night the woman leaves with him, leaving her husband alone and humiliated. In rare cases, the wife returns to her husband. I hope I can encourage your wife to make the right decision. But why? Who are we to you? She had a thoughtful look and turned away, but not before I saw a single tear in her eyes. It's a long story. Maybe I'll tell you, depending on how the rest of the evening goes. By the way, my name is Brianna. I know. I recognized you. I'm Matt Smythe. She looked at me with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Smythe. I know this sounds pretentious as hell. Why not just Smith, right? Well, my parents are originally from England and wanted to maintain a small connection with their native land. At that moment, the song ended, and I walked her to the table, thanked her for the dance, and returned to our table. Kelly was already there, her eyes throwing daggers at me. So, the prodigal son returns. Did you enjoy dancing with this beauty? I'm sorry? Why is my dance with Brianna worse than yours with Wilson? Oh, it's Brianna, isn't it? Already by name? I assume you called him Mr. Wilson? She had the politeness to blush. As you say, she said when I sat down. We started chatting with Chuck and Beverly again, but the tension could be cut with a knife. About an hour later, Kelly had to go to the bathroom. Surprisingly, Beverly did not go with her, but said that she needed to take something from the wardrobe and headed towards the exit of the club. Beverly returned a few minutes later, but Kelly was nowhere to be seen. When I got up to go check on her, Beverly looked worried but didn't say anything. My path to the restroom took me to Brianna's table, and she stood up, stopping me with her hand on my chest. Please, Brianna, I need to check on Kelly. Matt, I don't think she's here. Wilson went to the bathroom around the same time, and neither of them returned. Come with me. I'll check the ladies' room and you can check the men's, but I don't think we'll find them there. She was right. I had a vague suspicion, and we returned to my table. Chuck's eyes bulged at the sight of Brianna, but Beverly looked even more worried than before. Beverly, I said, Kelly seems to have left the building. Do you happen to know anything about this? Chuck struggled to tear his eyes away from Brianna and look at Beverly. Beverly, he said, what did you do? I bought the coat and gave it to Kelly at the front door. How do you know she needs it? Why did she need this? I understood this from the way she looked at me. She needed him to leave with Wilson. If I hadn't already been standing, I would have jumped out of the chair. You thought this was a good idea? Why? I asked. This may be the only time she will be with a real celebrity. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. Being with a real celebrity. You want to fuck a real celebrity, don't you? Come on, Matt, it's not that big of a deal. I guess you're not going with Brianna, she said, laughing. I wouldn't be so sure, Brianna said. I completely forgot she was here. Come on, Matt, let's get out of here. And she grabbed my hand as we headed towards the exit. We grabbed our coats, and as I helped her put it on, I said, thanks for the ego boost. I think I'll go home to my empty house to prepare for the end of my marriage. Why do you think that this was just an impetus for narcissism? Let's take your car. Why should Kelly be the only one who gets this once in a lifetime? I looked at her, expecting to hear, gotcha. But instead, I saw a warm, bright smile. What the hell? I thought. I didn't have any better offers at the moment, so with our arms around each other's waists, we walked to the garage and got into my car. Where to, my lady? I asked, and she directed me to an elite residential building. The garage attendant was about to shoo me away when he saw Brianna and motioned for me to enter. Brianna showed me where to park, and we took the elevator up to her apartment. I was shocked by her luxurious apartment. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Brianna simply tossed her coat onto a nearby chair, and I followed suit. Would you like something to drink? Brianna asked me. I'll have the same as you, I said, and she poured 2 glasses of white wine. She sat down on the edge of the couch and patted the seat next to her. As I sat down, she pressed the remote and soft music began to play from hidden speakers. As we sat in companionable silence, sipping wine, I wondered what her endgame was. Does she really think that we will sleep together? If that were the case, could I? I had no illusions about what Kelly was probably going to do if she hadn't already, but I believed in my marriage vows. The only problem was that Kelly didn't seem to share my views on marriage vows. Could I break them? As Beverly said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Could I afford to give this up? It looked like Brianna was going to try to take the decision out of my hands as she pressed herself against my shoulder and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. I was just sitting there taking in the situation, not to mention Brianna's intoxicating scent, when she apparently became impatient with my indecisiveness. She stood up, pulled me to my feet, and we started dancing. Shyness was not the order of the day as she placed my hands directly on her ass. I began to realize that, in the words of the Borg, resistance is futile, and that I could enjoy and deal with the consequences later. This time, I didn't wait for her to make a move. I threw my head back, and when she turned to protest, I took her face in my hands and kissed her lips. I have no idea how long we stood there kissing, but when we broke apart, we were out of breath. Her face was red, and I'm sure mine was too. She led me to her bedroom. I heard soft music as she sat me down on her bed. She began to unbutton her blouse, and I, as if in a trance, unbuttoned my shirt. I was just taking off my shirt when she took off her blouse, revealing her free breasts. I don't get hung up on bra sizes, but her breasts looked perfect on her figure. She slowly continued to undress, seducing and turning me on more and more. Then she helped me take off my clothes and started pleasuring my manhood, which I just pulled out of my trousers. I knew I wouldn't last long, and sure enough, it only took a moment before I felt the pressure building. "Brianna, I think I'll come," I said, but she just smiled at me. And that was 1 second when Has reached finish line. I grabbed her head and kissed her deeply. She returned my kisses. "Okay," she said, "my turn," and sat down on the edge of the bed. I don't want to brag, and maybe I shouldn't, since I had good teachers, but I'm good at please women. I pulled out all my tricks and gave her everything I could, and soon she was writhing in sweet agony. We were basking in the glow of some amazing sex. Was it better than Kelly? To use a cliché, it was different. "Brianna, you said you would tell me why you wanted to help me, to help us." She turned away, and I saw tears in her eyes again. "About 5 years ago, I worked at a small television studio and was just starting to make a name for myself. At the time, I was married to a guy similar to you. He was my biggest cheerleader, always willing to up the ante when a new opportunity required us to move. We were at a charity event when the head of the studio asked me to dance. He didn't even ask my husband, but I took his hand and left my husband sitting. I barely noticed my husband's anger and pushed it into the background as Chuck carried me away. His name was Charles, but he thought Chuck made him seem more like a man of the people, when in fact he thought nothing of those he considered beneath him. I can't say that he used any great seduction techniques on me, although he did make a few subtle, well, not so subtle hints that he could help my career. To my eternal shame, I left the club with him without even looking back at my husband. I was told that he put on a brave face, but was crushed. I wish I could say the sex was out of this world, or at least my career really took off, but in both cases the opposite was true. The sex was uninspiring at best. He seemed to think that just being with him must be a big thrill. Meanwhile, rumors about our affair caused problems. He was a big enough fish that the dirt wouldn't stick, but they let me go with enough severance pay to keep me from suing. My career took a step back, but I've obviously recovered, although my heart breaks when I think about my ex. I heard that he got married again and has children, which we always talked about. At that moment, she couldn't stand it, and I hugged her. My own eyes grew misty, thinking about how Kelly and I talked about our son and future children, wondering if we'd ever have them now. I noticed that Brianna had fallen asleep, so I pulled the blanket over us and hugged her as she unconsciously snuggled against me. I woke up to find myself lying in bed alone with the delicious smell of bacon coming from the kitchen. I used the bathroom, walked into the kitchen, and was greeted by the sight of Brianna in a long t-shirt, her buttocks peeking out teasingly from time to time. She smiled at me over her shoulder. "The coffee should be ready," she said, nodding towards the coffee pot in the corner. I poured myself a cup of the nectar of the gods and sipped it until she placed a plate of bacon and eggs in front of me. We ate in silence until I addressed the elephant in the room. So where do we go from here? For a few moments, she was lost in her thoughts. First, she said, breaking the silence, you and Kelly must decide where you will go. Can any of you survive what happened last night? What about us? She laughed, not without malice. Matt, there is no us, at least not now. We had a wonderful night, but we barely know each other, and until you or Kelly decide otherwise, you're married. If you can't figure it out, maybe we could see each other, see if there's more to it than sexual attraction. I must warn you in advance that my career comes first, right now. If I get a better opportunity, I might have to move. Could you move out or settle for a long-distance relationship? In addition, in my position, people often pester me, and there may be gossip. I promise you right now that if we become a couple, all that will happen will be gossip. But you have to be ready to deal with it. Now go home to your wife and see if there is anything left of your marriage that can be saved. Here is my business card. Let me know how it goes. With these words, she hugged me, kissed me warmly on the lips, and sent me on my way. I arrived home just as Wilson was dropping Kelly off. He gave me a small smirk as he pulled out of the driveway. Kelly and I walked up to the door at the same time. I opened the door, and she rushed past me, the smell of fresh shampoo and soap emanating from her. I followed her and closed the door behind me. "Where have you been?" she asked defiantly. Is she asking me about this? I thought, after what she did? I was with Brianna. She almost burst out laughing. Yeah, as if. You were probably holed up in a cheap motel somewhere and licking your wounds. She really drove me crazy. No, you can ask Chuck and Beverly. They saw her ask me to dance, and then we left together. She probably just took pity on you, put on a show so that you wouldn't look like such a loser. She probably left you as soon as you left the club. Things weren't going at all the way I had hoped. I thought we could at least try to move past what had happened, but the complete lack of respect for me made that less and less likely. I decided that one more conversation might take us to the point of no return, so I walked over to our closet, grabbed a large suitcase, and started throwing clothes into it. She just stood there with her arms crossed over her chest, a wry smile on her face, obviously thinking I was bluffing. Her look changed as I walked past and headed for the front door. Come on, you're not going to leave just because I had a little fling? No, I'm leaving because of your disrespect for me. FYI, I did spend the night with Brianna, and it was amazing. I returned home in the hope that we could cope with our mutual indiscretions. But I see that this is now impossible. Don't call me. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. I walked out of the house, not bothering to close the door, and saw her standing there, watching me as I got into the car. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry, so I turned the corner, slowed down, and let my tears flow. I paid for a week at an extended stay motel, and before I could plop down on my bed, the phone rang. I was going to ignore him, thinking it was Kelly, but when I saw it was Chuck, I replied, "Hi, Chuck." "Hello, Matt. What the hell happened?" Kelly just called Beverly, and damn was she pissed. She was furious. I almost screamed into the phone. She left me for some joke, and when I told her I spent the night with Brianna, she laughed. "Hey, Matt, Wilson isn't just some jock, and you have to admit that you and Brianna are a little hard to believe." "And you too," I said. "Damn, you saw us together, you saw us leaving together. Does no one respect me?" "Of course we respect you, Matt, but you and Brianna? Come on, be serious." "Oh, but Kelly and Wilson are quite believable. Look, I don't know what's going to happen to me and Kelly, but I think I need to find new friends. Goodbye." "Wait, Matt, but I'm already disconnected." Kelly and I went back and forth for a while. She even apologized for the Wilson stunt. But the real sticking point was her lack of respect for me. Even a call from Brianna confirming our night together didn't help. "Nice try, Matt," she said. "I think you're her charity project this month." I spent another week at the motel. Brianna and I dated a couple of times, and the hosts even teased Brianna about her new mystery man. But she just brushed it off. One good thing about being alone was that it gave me time to work on my writing. I posted stories on internet sites from time to time, much to Kelly's displeasure, which I believe was another sign of her disrespect. Brianna, on the other hand, when I complained that Kelly put my texts aside and never read them, insisted on looking. I resisted, fearing further embarrassment. I shouldn't have worried. Brianna was impressed and even made some suggestions. I think that was the turning point, and I filed for divorce. Kelly was stunned. "You're not seriously going to divorce me because of my stupid affair with Wilson, are you?" "Actually, no, but the fact that you consider my humiliation a stupid trifle partly explains why I'm divorcing you. You don't respect me. I wonder if you ever did. You don't believe that Brianna is interested in me and my stories, which you laugh at without even reading them, Brianna thinks are pretty good," I said and walked out the door. Kelly was struggling with her divorce, although I don't know why. Maybe she just didn't like the idea of losing. Our friends tried to help, but I think they made the situation worse by laughing at the idea of me and Brianna, telling me that I would never find anyone as hot as Kelly. Of course, the court ordered a consultation. I went through the charade. I didn't do anything stupid like play on my phone during the sessions, but whenever it was brought up, I made it clear that I was simply no longer interested in marrying Kelly. The counselor eventually relented and recommended that the court move forward with the divorce process, and Kelly tearfully agreed. It was hard being a dad every weekend, but my son and I tried our best. It helped that the divorce, once Kelly realized it was over, wasn't particularly acrimonious, and we were able to live together peacefully. Brianna was at the final court hearing, and as we walked out holding hands, the look on Kelly's face was priceless. We maintained friendly relations for most of the year. Although we were exceptional, we made no promises of eternity. With Brianna's busy schedule and no marital obligations, I was able to devote more time to my writing, and Brianna continued to provide valuable advice. When my last story was finished, she suggested that I send it to a publisher, but I was afraid of being rejected. Brianna finally got an offer from a Chicago studio, which was a big step forward, and we had one last night. We skipped dinner to spend as much time together as possible. Although we made love, it wasn't some wild freedom. We probably spent more time cuddling, talking about our feelings, our hopes and dreams for the future. Once she was asleep, I got up and made a few more changes to my story before crawling back into bed and cuddling with her, enjoying the feeling of her cuddling even tighter to me. When I woke up, she was already out of bed, so I went to the bathroom and took a quick shower. As I walked past the laptop table, I was puzzled to see it open. I was sure I closed it last night. I shrugged and headed into the kitchen where Brianna was preparing breakfast. I came up from behind, hugged her, and buried my nose in her neck. She turned her head and kissed me. "Breakfast is almost ready. How about coffee?" "Your wish is my law." And with a wide bow, I poured coffee and put the cups on the table. I'm afraid most of the cooking was wasted as we just pushed the food onto our plates and looked at each other. Finally, it was time to clean up so I could leave, and Brianna could prepare to leave. We had already packed most of her things into the car, and the moving service came to pick up the rest. I grabbed my laptop, hugged and kissed Brianna one last time, and we parted ways with hopeful promises to stay in touch. I gave myself a couple of weeks to grieve the end of our relationship and then began to cautiously enter the dating scene. I deliberately avoided places where I might expect to see Kelly or our old gang, although I saw them from time to time. But we never got close to each other. One day I was looking through the mail and saw an envelope from Battles Publishing. I was puzzled and put it aside while I looked through the rest of my mail. I took the envelope to the kitchen, sat down with a cup of coffee and opened it. "Dear Mr. Smythe, we have received your manuscript and are seriously considering the possibility of publishing it. Please contact me as soon as possible to arrange an appointment. Sincerely yours, Melanie Wilson, Associate Editor." What the fuck? I've never served anything to anyone. Then I remembered. The laptop that I had left closed, but found open in the morning. "Brianna." She copied the file and showed it to someone. I didn't know if I wanted to kick her or kiss her. On the one hand, she acted behind my back. On the other, the publisher became interested in my story. I decided to get even without telling her anything. I didn't know what connection she might have, but I hoped I could prevent anyone from telling her before I was ready. I contacted Ms. Wilson to make an appointment. It didn't take long to come to an agreement, but before I could get too excited, I had to wait for the editor to do his job. I was excited to see that the text seemed more red than black. I swallowed my pride and started working hard on all of her edits. I had to admit that she was right most of the time, and she listened to my objections seriously. She was right more often than not. After 3 passes, we were ready to print. I didn't tell Brianna, although we've spoken several times since I received the letter. I was doing a book signing in Chicago and called Brianna to set up a visit. Opening the door, she hugged me tightly and kissed me. "Oh, Matt, I'm so glad to see you again. What brought you to Chicago, business or pleasure?" "I hope it's both," I winked. "I could help with that last one," she said with an exaggerated wink. Walking out of her house, she was amazed by the limousine. "Wow, things must be looking up," she said. "You could say that," I said. "This is your city. Why don't you choose a restaurant?" She told the driver, and we drove off. Although we did not have a reservation, they recognized it immediately, and soon we were seated. "So, Matt, what business brought you to Chicago?" "It's a surprise," I said, and she pouted. We ate deliciously, but decided to skip dessert. "Let's go to my place?" she asked with a flirtatious smile. "I have some things to do first. Why don't you come with me? I don't think you'll be bored." She was disappointed and puzzled, but nodded approvingly. The limo pulled up to my hotel, and the driver helped Brianna out, and I followed. I led her into the lobby and up the escalator to the second floor where the book signing ceremony was to take place. I couldn't stop her from seeing the sign with my photo on it, and she ran into my arms. "Matt, you did it, you did it. I knew you could handle it." "Well, I got a little help," I said with a grin. I don't know what you're talking about, Matt. Don't be modest, Brianna. I never submitted my story and no one else had access to my laptop. You will not make a good thief. You left your laptop open. I closed it that night. She blushed. I'm not angry, Brianna. I would never have the courage to send out my story. You believed in me more than I did myself. I can never thank you enough. No need to thank me, Matt. I'm just happy to see you succeed. At that moment, a representative from the publishing house approached me and said it was time to sign the contract, so I quickly kissed Brianna and followed the representative to the table set for me. I watched as Brianna leaned against the wall, smiling, as a long line formed for people to sign their books. Her smile faded a little as some women posed for selfies and kissed me on the cheek. I just smiled, shrugged, and felt relieved when she smiled back. Finally, the signing ended and I joined Brianna in giving her a big kiss to make up for all the kisses I had received. How about we come back to my place so I can welcome you to Chicago? As tempting as it may sound, my room is upstairs. Besides, I already let the limo driver go. Not too confident, huh? She said with a wide smile, and we went up to my room. We spent the night getting reacquainted with our bodies, then slept before ordering breakfast to our room. Matt, where do we go now? Can you stay a while? Sorry, but I cannot. I have a few more stops on the tour, and then I have to get back to my day job. I understand, Matt, but let's stay in touch. I really enjoy spending time together. That's what we did. We talked, we texted, we emailed, we made phone calls, whatever worked at the time. My publisher showed interest in the second book, and I spent every free minute on it. As soon as I sent it to the editor, I called Brianna. Hey, Matt, it's nice to hear your voice again. Me too, Brianna. I have great news. I wrote another book. This is great news. When can I read the next great American novel? This will take some time. I just presented the first draft, but that's not all. About? And what? If the book goes well, they will give me a contract for 3 more books. I will be able to quit my job and write full-time. That's great, Matt. I knew you had it in you. Yes, it is. I owe it all to you. Without support, I would still be writing just for my own pleasure. Don't say that, Matt. You have real talent. Sooner or later, it would have manifested itself. Maybe so, but there are thousands of talented people who simply don't get that kind of breakthrough. If you hadn't sent my story, who knows if I would have had the courage to present it myself. We argued, but she knew I was right. I don't know if it was my experience with the first book, or if I just had more confidence, but the editing process went very smoothly, and the book was soon ready to go to press. I spent most of my vacation on my first book tour, so I had to take unpaid leave and planned my stop in Chicago for the whole weekend. I skipped looking for a hotel and spent the weekend with Brianna. I couldn't get enough of Brianna's amazing body and couldn't figure out why she was so attracted to me, and eventually I had to open my big mouth. God, Matt, I love you, but you men can be so ignorant sometimes. She suddenly fell silent. Neither of us had ever said the L word before. Seriously, Matt, she continued, I can be as caught up as the next person in superficial attraction, but lasting love means seeing beneath the surface. Sure, you're attractive, but what's special about you is what's on the inside. Even after what Kelly did to you, I had to practically seduce you into my bed. What could I say? She was right, and I had no idea. Sorry, Brianna. I don't know what my problem was. Maybe I just don't value myself. Maybe Kelly has punched a hole in my self-confidence, but I shouldn't have projected that onto you. It's okay, Matt. I understand. You just continue to be a kind, caring person, and you will never have to doubt my love for you. She just told me she loved me again, and I didn't tell her I loved her, although being the shrewd woman I am, I think she knew. And yet, I could not leave this thought in the air. I love you too, Brianna. I know, silly, she said, and gave me a soul-searing kiss. The rest of the tour went well, as did book sales. When I got home, I invited Brianna to stay. We visited a few old places, and people who knew us before seemed amazed that we were still together. Others recognized Brianna from her occasional reporting on the show. I even got some recognition from my books. From time to time, we would cross paths with someone from the old company, but I was not interested in rubbing their nose in my success, both personal and professional. For their part, they seemed too embarrassed to approach us, although Kelly seemed more angry than embarrassed. Well, life is too short to waste it on fools. The first 2 nights our love was wild and full of passion, but I had other plans for our last night. I took her to the most romantic restaurant in the city, where our conversation was full of endearments, but nothing special. No, I didn't stage a big proposal at the restaurant. I knew that serious discussions would follow and wanted to find a more private place. Where are we going to dance today, Matt? Actually, I was thinking maybe we could go straight home tonight, if that's okay. Of course, Matt, she said, clearly not understanding what I was thinking. When we got to my house, I hung up our coats and asked her to sit while I got the wine. Sitting down, I handed her a glass and proposed a toast. For love and friendship, I said. For love and friendship, she repeated, and we clinked glasses. I sipped the wine, quietly watching Brianna. After finishing the wine, she jumped up, almost swallowing the ring I put in her glass. Thurs, she muttered. Is this what I think? I turned to her and took her hands in mine. Yes, Brianna, it is. I cannot describe how my life has changed since you came into it. I can only imagine what it might be like if you were a part of this forever. Please say that you will be my wife. Oh, Matt, if you only knew how much I want to say yes. But I already told you that my career comes first, and if a better offer comes, I'll probably take it. I can't ask you to raise your rates every time I change jobs. You won't have to. What do you mean? My last book was successful. Successful enough that a publisher gave me a 3-book deal with a big enough advance that I could quit my job and write full-time. And I did. Did what? I was discharged from my job. As soon as my lease is up, I'll be moving to Chicago. If you allow me, I would like us to be together." She just sat there with her eyes wide open and her mouth open, and then she threw herself into my arms. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." We had a small wedding. My parents flew in with my son Danny, and Brianna's parents were there with her sister. We spent Saturday with my family, seeing as many places as we could pack in one day, and Brianna used her weather girl magic to give us a sunny day to get married by the lake. After saying goodbye, full of happy tears, we went on our honeymoon to Barbados. It would be nice to say that we lived happily ever after, and in general we did, but two powerful careers coupled with groupies. And yes, I had my share, although I didn't understand why, can cause some petty jealousy, but we made a promise to always talk about everything, and we smoothed out the bumps in the road. Luckily, there was only one step in Brianna's career, moving to New York City for the Today Show. It didn't really matter though, since I could write anywhere. We had been living in New York for about a year when Brianna surprised me with a pregnancy test. I didn't even know she was off birth control, but I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to be a full-time dad again. I love Danny to death, and it's so hard to say goodbye when my weekend is over. It was a little surreal having the whole country following our pregnancy, but we got used to it. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Brittany, and luckily, she seems to have inherited her mother's looks. Of course, the program had to have photos as soon as possible after birth and videos soon after. I had just finished a book tour for my 5th book, and the publisher wanted me to sign a new contract, but I didn't feel like I had another topic, but I promised them first place if I wrote more. Meanwhile, royalties from the books, coupled with some movie deals, kept the cash flowing, and of course, Brianna was making a lot of money, so I settled happily into my new role as Mr. Mom. If you ever asked me if I was happy that my wife cheated on me, I would ask you if you were crazy, but here and now, I am happier than I ever could have imagined. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.